Chapter 8. So, I assume you have a plan, Silver said to the soldier, fighting to control her breath. He was a trapped animal, angry because he was scared, and scared because he didn't fully understand the nature of his trap. "Get out of my way, grey coat," he snarled. "I'm not getting trapped inside with the rest of them. I'm not like them. I am a rank 2 Aegis lieutenant." He straightened. "I outrank any civilian contractor, and I order you to return to your post." Silver winced at the man's attempt. He was still trying to fight, and Greyrot had won days ago when it first touched him. "I can't do that, and you know it. Please stay calm. You have a 3 in 4 chance of surviving if you keep your sores closed. As strong as you look, I am sure the chances are even better than that. You know who won't get those kinds of odds?" Silver paused for effect, the man staring at her while his hands opened, then closed into fists. "The children who will be trapped inside the wider quarantine zone if you make contact with anyone. And if they survive, will their mothers? Hundreds would be orphaned, and thousands more would die. You don't know that. I probably don't even have it," the man said weakly. "I'll go outside of the city somewhere and wait it out. Just a short leave from my duties." "What's your name, soldier?" Silver asked, hoping to relate to the man. "Trig," he said flatly, emotions warring on his face. "Okay, Trig. Tell me this," Silver replied. "Have you had contact with anyone outside of your platoon over the last few days? Have you had any issues with your suit? Any information you have can save lives." "I followed protocol perfectly," he said, still making his case after the verdict. "With the manpower shortage, I've done nothing but work. I haven't had time to write home. I've eaten standard rations so many times that I've almost forgotten what the inside of a privy looks like. I've not been to a tavern or brothel. This shouldn't be happening to me." "You're right, Trig. This shouldn't happen to you. Or anyone," she said. She tried to sound as understanding as she could, but the infection came from somewhere, and when the Aegis soldiers showed up, she wouldn't be allowed to ask any more questions. "It sounds like you have been careful. So, you haven't talked to anyone outside of the Aegis at all?" Silver pressed. "Other than that lady who handed us those prayer ribbons, no one at all." Silver went still. "What lady? What did she look like?" "I didn't get a good look at her," he responded, confused. "We were outside of the quarantine zone on our way to the new barracks. She had her face covered by the oil cloak." "Who was with you?" "This is important, Trig." He was about to answer, but the shouts of the approaching Aegis soldiers sounded in the distance, and his face hardened. "I don't wish you any harm, but if you don't move, harm will come to you all the same. If I am sick, then a broken nose by my hand will surely see you lying next to me in the quarantine ward." Silver knew she had earned a few days in quarantine already. If she had to fight the man, she would be infected, in earnest. She didn't have plague gear on, and she didn't have any way to delay him without being touched. Silver let out a low chuckle, clearly confusing the soldier. "You know the Reclaimers volunteer to come here?" she said, looking up. "You were assigned to plague duty. You didn't have a choice. The Greycoats, you see? Each of us chose to be here. We volunteered to help the sick of Harbor's Edge, knowing we might end up as one of them. If stopping you means I must burn myself to survive, so be it. Any man or woman wearing grey would say the same thing. If you insist on not going alone to the quarantine zone," Silver's mouth split into a smile that must have looked insane, "then, I suppose I'm your date, soldier." Trig stared at her, mouth agape for another moment. Then he growled and rushed her. Silver was yanked off her feet by the back of her uniform as Bram passed her, wielding a long, heavy street sweeper's broom used to clear rubbish from the alleyways. He extended it one-handed toward the soldier's face, with the ease only a man of his size could display. Wham! The metal head of the broom ruined the soldier's nose and sent him sprawling on the stones. "Are you rusted crazy?" Bram yelled. "You would have been infected." "I wasn't going to let him go, Bram. Anyway, I trusted you would get here in time," Silver said, doing her best to slow her racing heart. Trig moaned from the ground and propped himself up on his elbows. "Just my team." "What?" Silver asked, You wanted to know who was with me, Trig said, his head sagging. Just me and the 4 assigned to my rotation. We all got the prayer ribbons. 4 soldiers in full plague suits ran up from behind, followed at a distance by a 3-bar Aegis officer, and Chiron. The soldiers rushed Trig, flipping him over and forcing him into a temporary rubberized quarantine suit the Aegis kept in case someone broke containment. You there, Greycoat, the officer called through a handkerchief he held over his mouth. Explain yourself. Silver turned to address the officer. I heard him cough, sir. When I pressed about his medcheck, he ran. I sent one of my team to inform you while Bram and I pursued. The rope shows the trail. I can't be sure what he touched, but we were lucky enough to avoid direct contact, all the same. The officer nodded, as if it was what he expected. I am glad you understand then. No chances can be taken. Understand what? Bram asked. Bram, don't resist. You'll only make it worse, Silver said with a sigh. What do you, Bram said, as the second pair of suited soldiers grabbed him from behind and began forcing him into a quarantine suit. Silver chuckled darkly. She could only see their eyes, but that was enough to read their skepticism about whether the rubber of the suit would stretch far enough to zip up. Bram groaned as they pulled at the seams to force him inside. Why are you detaining them? Kieran protested. They aren't sick. He can't know that, Kieran. Any more than we could have known that Trig here wasn't sick without a medcheck. We have to be sure. This earned a nod from the officer. 3 days. Then a medcheck? Silver asked. Another nod. We only ask that we be kept separate from this man, Silver said to the officer. While you can't be sure, we maintain that we did not make physical contact with him. Agreed, the officer stated. The soldiers, now finished with Bram, approached Silver. One more thing, Silver said, as they held the suit so she could step inside. The officer raised an eyebrow but nodded. This man had contact with a woman who gave his team prayer ribbons. You should do a medcheck on his team. Can you let me know the results when you do? And what business of yours is that? The officer asked. The Reclaimers' supplemental rations remain on administrative hold. We were making our case when we encountered this soldier. If his team is infected, it would strengthen my case for the Marshal to release those rations. The people need them. That they do. All right, Greycoat. I will send a missive to the Marshal when the results come back. We owe you that much, at least. What you did was brave. Just before the hood covered Silver's face, she called to Kieran. Let Barton know. We will be out 3 days. Tell him I'm sorry. She could see Kieran nod through the glass goggles, hugging her eyes, but she could no longer hear his reply over the hum of the respirator. Rust it. Barton's going to be furious with me. She was escorted briskly back the way they had come. More soldiers in quarantine suits passed them, headed the other direction, dousing trash, tools and trinkets with oil, then allowing the flames to consume them along with any trace of grey rot that might remain. She had wished for light during her pursuit, but the deep red of the fires and their acrid stink left her preferring the dark. When they exited the alleys, they made their way past the crowd of soldiers lining the thoroughfare. All of them wanted to witness the spectacle, but only from a distance. Their grim procession offered the soldiers a helping of morbid curiosity, a reminder that their greatest fear lived and had not yet touched them. Silver knew they were headed inside the quarantine zone, to one of the cleared buildings serving as an incubation zone for soldiers that were suspected of contamination. The Aegis couldn't afford to lose the manpower, so after 2 days, they would draw a knife lightly along their arm, slightly breaking the skin. A full day later, the scratch would be thoroughly inspected, along with the rest of their body, for any signs of opening sores. Their throats would be checked for irritation, and any sign of sickness would earn them another 3-day waiting period. She much preferred this to the sick ward for soldiers to where Trig was bound. There, rows of moaning soldiers would wait their turn to be aggressively checked, for new sores to be burned shut. Survivors were immune, so any who spent 10 days sick and didn't die were put back to work inside the quarantine zone. The Aegis wouldn't waste such a convenient resource. An old woman with an oil cloak, The rain and mist from the bay made the article of clothing a staple on coat racks in the city. Who wouldn't want some protection from the elements in such a fog-choked hellhole? It still bothered her, though. Something was off about the woman she saw giving coppers to the kids a week earlier. She would need to track that kid down once she was released. The puzzle turned over in her head, making her chuckle then wince at the fog her breath created inside her goggles. Bram hated it when a question took her mind. He knew once it had her, it didn't let go. The rubber quarantine suit was hot and chafed her skin as she walked, but it was the stares from every soldier she passed that made her the most uncomfortable. She knew that she hadn't touched Trig. He hadn't spat on her. She hadn't even made contact with any of the garbage bins or debris the man threw into the street. She knew these things, but they didn't. Greyrot had many symptoms, but the worst of them was fear.